Welcome, one and all, to episode 49 of the NFL Draft Breakdown Podcast. I'm your host, Seth Cox. With me tonight, my co host, Justin Higdon. And Justin, what an interesting weekend. What a different weekend than what we'd seen before. But before we get to that, how have you been, man?
I've been good, man. I can't believe this is 49 episodes of the show that we've done here at Draft Breakdown, and I don't even remember how many we did when we were the old draft. For all our old, longtime followers, the old Draft Savages podcast, and even before that at the sports headquarters. We've been doing this for a long time, so we're into what is this? Our fourth year doing this, and
Yep, fourth year.
yeah, it's just amazing that we still decide to find the time to do this because sometimes we were just talking about it. Sometimes it can drag on. But last weekend, we had a pretty interesting weekend of college football action, and there were some outside factors and some off the field stories to talk about, and then we're going to get into the wide receiver class because I know a lot of people that follow us on Twitter, a lot of people we talk to, are really into this. Everyone loves skill positions because of fantasy football, so receivers are always a hot topic, and we're going to dig into that a little bit, and of course, we'll probably dig up a couple of hot takes.
And, this weekend was obviously headlined by Hurricane Matthew on the East Coast. Hope everybody was safe. I didn't see too many instances in the U.S. where there was a huge issue, but, hope everybody's safe. But, in fact, some college football games. Obviously, Florida LSU was canceled. A couple of players that it affected. Two guys that we've talked quite a bit about.
Glowingly last week.
Yeah, DeShone Kizer and Mitch Trubisky. We've talked about this before, and this is the hard part for you and I, and I think for anybody, to be honest, but for you and I, we've talked about this before with Geno Smith in the Blizzard game of the Pinstripe Bowl of 2012, I want to say it was.
Right.
And we said you can't take into account the Blizzard. You can't factor that in. But then he ends up in New York, where that can happen 3-4 times a year. And then you go, oh, crap. And obviously there's some other issues in New York. They like Ryan Fitzpatrick, and he's not a very good player. But how much do you put into games like this for guys that have shown borderline elite skills and talent, but then the elements kind of wreaked havoc on what we were expecting to see?
Well, I think it's fair to factor in bad weather games for quarterback play because, for example, we saw the Cleveland Browns head coach Hugh Jackson and their offensive coordinator Pep Hamilton went on tour of all the pro days this past year, and part of their thing was to Pep Hamilton had a water bottle and he soaked the ball and then have the quarterback throw the ball. He did it with Goff. He did it with Wentz. Some say that was part of why they didn't love Wentz. Of course, Cleveland's going to have a lot of bad weather games, probably 2 or 3 a year. I think it's kind of overblown because I think that it's kind of rare that you have a quarterback who's exceptional in poor conditions. And Tom Brady immediately leaps to mind. Like that guy's exceptional when it comes to poor weather. I've seen actually Philadelphia Eagles coach Doug Peterson when he was playing for Cleveland. He had a really, really good game in a heavy snowfall in Cleveland at a game I was at many years ago. But this is different. This is different because this is a hurricane condition, and what Kizer was dealing with, especially in against North Carolina State, was plus 40 mile an hour winds and a torrential rainfall that we saw standing water on that field. And my take was if he plays really well in this game, that's going to be a big plus. But if he plays poorly, it's kind of expected. It's kind of expected that any quarterback is going to play poorly. And then when his coach continues to call pass plays, and some of them long developing pass plays in those conditions, where he has Kizer taking shots deep down the field, where that wind is just going to carry the ball and just wreak havoc with it. I just thought it was a poor game plan. We've kind of ripped on Brian Kelly before. Brian Kelly actually took responsibility. He and his coaching staff took responsibility for some of the play calling in that game and for not putting his players in position to win. I don't think he can really crush Kizer for this game. I think with Trubisky, the conditions were a little bit better. They weren't quite as bad. So I think with Trubisky, it's a little bit more concerning. He didn't have the volume of rainfall from what I saw that Kizer had. But again, you've got a guy, he's from Northeast Ohio. He's actually probably played in poor weather before, back in his high school days. So it's something to keep an eye on. I think it's, Trubisky had been on such a hot streak. He throws 2 picks against Virginia Tech. It was his first 2 of the year. He didn't have he didn't show great accuracy in the elements, but we have seen him show exceptional accuracy in good conditions. So if you're a team that you think you're going to be playing a bunch of bad weather games and you can't win without him throwing the ball 30 times, maybe Trubisky's not for you. With Kizer, I think it's just kind of a throwaway game. I really don't see how, just watching that game, if anyone watched that game and really thinks you can take anything away from that, email the show, email us, or tweet us and let us know why you think that is a good, what we can take away that's useful from that game. Because I just thought it was such a terrible condition. I mean, if they were going to cancel Florida and LSU, from what I understand, Florida's conditions by Saturday were not that bad. They were dealing with some wind, but not that kind of rainfall. And this is the game they should have canceled. Those guys were playing in standing water.
And I think you're right. I think with what happened with Trubisky, you kind of want to see him do a little more there. But yeah, Kizer, torrential, terrible.
I think the other thing with Trubisky too is he does not have the volume of starts that Kizer has. So we've just seen more out of Kizer in his career in general. And Trubisky's kind of a new man on the scene. We talked about him 2 weeks in a row, and then he kind of caught fire last week on Twitter leading into that game. And then he has his worst game of the year. So that's a little disappointing, but I do think there is some, I do think we can make some concession for these guys because it was a unique circumstance for both.
Staying on the topic of quarterbacks, what do we make of Chad Kelly's bye week escapades at his brother? Is that right?
Right.
Brother's high school football game.
So for anybody who's listening who didn't hear about it, last Friday, Ole Miss had a bye week. So Chad Kelly was watching his brother's high school team play. And it's not 100% clear to me if Chad Kelly was sitting in the stands or if he was standing on the sideline with the team. My understanding is that he was in the stands. I know his mom was there in attendance. And his brother was hit out of bounds. His brother plays quarterback. And ran out of bounds and then was hit late. And it was a cheap shot. It was flagged. But I don't know if you saw the hit, Seth, but it did not look like the type of hit that would start a brawl. It looked like the type of hit that would start some pushing and shoving. But Chad Kelly comes storming out wherever he was and has to be physically restrained by coaches, by his brother's high school coaches and some of his teammates. And this is to me, that's absurd. It's not the way that any 22-year-old man should be conducting himself. Was he going to fight 15 to 18-year-olds? Was he going to fight those high school students. What was his aim of being out there? And I understand protecting your family member, but this is during the course of a game. This isn't his brother getting jumped in an alley. This isn't his brother getting, randomly assaulted. This is a football game. His brother's got his teammates and his coaching staff right there to stick up for him. Chad Kelly looks like a maniac for coming out of the stands and engaging in this way. Now, he didn't throw any punches or anything. It was kind of like a hold me back, bro kind of moment. But to me, that's who Chad Kelly is. I mean, this is a guy who was kicked out of a bar and who threatened people that he was going to get his assault rifle and come back and shoot them. He's a big talk. This is a guy who's been kicked out of a school. He was kicked out of Clemson. He was dismissed, if we want to be technical with the terms. And then I think he was dismissed from a high school team as well. So if this was one thing on the resume of Chad Kelly, you might forgive it. You might say boys will be boys, and this is a guy sticking up for a family member. But this is just another incident with this guy. I think he just acts like a punk, and it's not acceptable. That's not acceptable at any level, Seth. I mean, if you coach your sons, and if an older brother came out to fight during a middle school game or during a high school game or a college game or a pro game, can you imagine if somebody comes out of the stands at a pro game to fight because their brother got hit late out of bounds? I mean, A, he would get his butt kicked, and B, he would be arrested for trespassing on the field. It's just unacceptable to me. And this is a player, I've talked about this before. Chad Kelly, we'll talk about this a little bit later. He's a talented guy, and he's actually having a really good statistical season. But can you believe in this guy to lead your team? With all the things that I just mentioned, can you believe in this guy to lead your team? What kind of excuses are you going to make? Because we saw people hammer Johnny Manziel for his off the field. It turns out maybe rightfully so. And if Johnny Manziel, who didn't get kicked out of two schools and who didn't engage in this type of thing, he did get a bar fight, though. He did get arrested for a bar fight before he ever started. But if we're going to crush Manziel, I mean, what are we saying where this guy on NFLDraftScout.com, that's linked with CBS Sports, they're still saying Chad Kelly's a first or second round pick. There is no way in hell I would spend any draft pick on this guy, let alone first or second. I don't care how talented he is. I don't believe in him as a leader for my team.
Yeah, and I think that's what it boils down to is, like, what can you get? What can you get from this guy? Like, what does he do for you? And as if we killed like a Teddy Bridgewater, and by we, I don't mean you and I, but like no. if Teddy Bridgewater was killed for being too quiet, too soft-spoken, not rah-rah enough, like, aren't we going to go the other way with Chad Kelly, that he is too much of a wild card, loose cannon, like you're not sure you can, if he's a trustworthy, I hate saying that because it's kind of a, play on everything, but like, is he a guy you can trust week to week? I don't know.
I don't know that, that my thing is, and me, people who've listened to the show know for years that I am not a guy to hammer players for their off the field incidents. I make note of them. If they're severe, if it's a sexual assault or something like that, or, something criminal, domestic abuse, something criminally violent, then that is a problem for me. But if a guy's getting a DUI or he's got some weed, those are the kind of things I think we can forgive to a degree, because college kids are going to make errors in judgment. Now, but here is a player who we know on at least two separate occasions within the past year and a half, almost 2 years, but within the past year and a half, has threatened violence on other people. And a quarterback. This isn't a defensive end. I don't know that would make it better, but it would at least, you kind of have that aggression from the defensive players. This is your quarterback. This is a guy people have to get behind, and if he's going to be, I just don't see other quarterbacks in it. I don't see quarterbacks in the NFL acting like that, and I don't see owners or coaches gravitating toward those kind of guys. It's a shame because I do think that Chad Kelly has a good arm and he has athleticism and he has a style of play that I would otherwise enjoy, but I don't enjoy him as a person.
Going to the next topic, quarterbacks still. We wanted to talk about the Big Ten quarterbacks and the guys that are eligible this year. Beathard's eligible, right?
Yeah, I just want to talk about these two guys because they played each other last week.
All right, go ahead. CJ Beathard and Mitch first-round pick Leidner.
So Beathard and Leidner squared off last week, and Leidner, we have mentioned and we have said, no way this guy's a first-round pick. And that takes stands. He ended up 13 of 33. He was all over the place. And the one thing I will say about Leidner is he is a tough cookie and he has a ton of starting experience. We know he played through a foot injury last year, and I think he's got a concussion now. And it seems like it happened at a point where he probably should have come out of the game on Saturday, but they didn't recognize it until after the game, and now he's going to miss this weekend's game. So we know Leidner's tough. He's probably a good leader because he's started a lot of games. His teammates have been there with him for a long time. But actually he can make a really nice pass every once in a while. He's a decent runner. He's a big guy. But he's just not good. He's just not consistent is what I should say. I shouldn't say he's not good. It's possible that there's some coach that can get the best of Leidner and compile it into a great mixtape. But right now, as he is, he's so erratic that you just have to, you have to watch 15 throws to see that one gem. And on the other hand, where you look at CJ Beathard, he's not the biggest guy. He's athletic enough. He can run and move a little bit, and he's also a tough guy. He stood in a number of times on Saturday, took some big hits when he delivered the ball. Not the best physical skills, but it's there. It's decent. So with Beathard, I look at the crop of quarterbacks that was drafted this past year, and I get the feeling that Beathard is a guy who is going to impress people with his football IQ and just general athleticism and the way he gets rid of the ball and the way he leads, the way he runs an offense. And I get the feeling that he'll be a late round pick. Now, Leidner probably will be as well based on his physical attributes, his size and arm strength and a little bit of running ability. But I think it's Beathard who is probably the better NFL quarterback in that he could stick as a long-term backup, and Leidner is a player who might go a little earlier than he should and then disappoint. So that's really all I want to say about those two guys. Leidner he was outplayed by a guy who's just not as physically gifted as he is, and you can see where one guy just has better command than the other.
Getting into the wide receiver class, it's an interesting class because it seems that a lot of the talent, at least initially, comes in two forms. One, underachieving wide receivers on teams with either bad teams or bad quarterbacks. Or two, solid slot receivers. When you look at this class overall, we know the names at the top: Juju, Smith-Schuster. Mm-hmm. You have Mike Williams, Corey Davis. I've seen Isaiah Ford talked about quite a bit. The kids from LSU, Malachi Dupree and Travin Durrell. But Is there anybody that has, to this point, stuck out to you as being, the guy, the Will Fuller, so to speak, of this draft class?
No, it's more like who is the is there an Amari Cooper? Is there like a Mike Evans or a Kevin? I know Kevin White's on IR for the second year, but is there that kind of top? There's definitely no Julio Jones in this class. So when people talk about the top receiver, the wide receiver one in this class, they're usually talking about Juju Smith-Schuster or Mike Williams of Clemson. So Williams, a senior, and Smith-Schuster out of USC, the junior, who has kind of had he had a slow start, and then they make a quarterback change, and he's kind of catching on now. So there were questions about whether Smith-Schuster could separate, and I think he's kind of answered those a little bit with his recent play. I heard a stat, and I think this is probably from a couple weeks ago, but he's scoring most of their receiving touchdowns. So when they're passing the ball, when they're scoring through the air, it's Juju Smith-Schuster. Maybe by default, he might be the number one receiver in this class if you're looking for that big body type that can pluck the ball and get yards after the catch, screen off defenders, win a jump ball. Mike Williams is, to me, he's not the wide receiver one in this class. And then I would get into the smaller, faster guys probably before I would get to Mike Williams, just based on what I've seen. I know there are a lot of people that like him, and with him, I don't really see, at least in the couple of games I've watched, I haven't really seen the separation I would like to see. I haven't really seen him get up and battle for the ball the way I would like to see a wide receiver one. So he's not on that same tier as some of the other big-bodied receivers that we've seen come out in recent years. And I actually think that part of the reason why Deshaun Watson has gotten off to a bit of a slow start is because he doesn't have the caliber of skill players that he's had, that Clemson has seen in the past. He doesn't have a DeAndre Hopkins or Sammy Watkins. Mike Williams is not in the same category as those guys. And maybe part of that is that they didn't work together last year because Williams got hurt. So maybe Williams is still rounding into form. I definitely want to give this guy a chance, but I just don't see it with him. I feel like at this point he's been gifted the top receiver slot or the top senior receiver slot. And in some ways I kind of feel that way about Juju Smith-Schuster as well, kind of being gifted those high slots without really justifying it yet. But to me, the jury's out on those guys, and I just haven't seen a player that's a wide receiver one when you're talking about big-bodied receivers that can win those jump balls. So I see in the next tier down some smaller, thinner, but fast guys who I think can really be big-time players at the next level.
And I think there's a group of players in this that, like you said, I don't know if there's the number one, like, with a bullet type receiver in this class. But I think there can be guys similar in skill set, maybe not production, but like to a DeAndre Hopkins, these type of players that can win in different varieties.
Right. Right, I agree with that. And I should mention, too, Corey Davis from Western Michigan. I think he's kind of a competitor with Smith-Schuster and with Mike Williams because he's another big body guy. And in some ways, I'm more impressed with what I've seen out of him.
And, and then you have some names that are coming up kind of newer. And the NFL, the college football touchdown reception leader is John Ross from Washington. He's a slot guy.
Mm-hmm.
You have some interesting slot guys in Curtis Samuel out of Ohio State, Ryan Switzer out of North Carolina. You have a guy like Kermit Whitfield out of Florida State. You have some interesting talent.
And you mentioned Ford out of Virginia Tech, who looks like a really – when I'm looking at guys like the guys you just mentioned and then Isaiah Ford, guys that weigh 180, 190 pounds, can they fly? Are those guys the Will Fuller guys that we saw? Is there a Will Fuller? Is there a 4.3 guy in this crop? Because once you dip into that weight class, I think you're looking at straight speed, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. Like, you look at John Brown in Arizona, Will Fuller obviously in Houston. Deshaun Jackson's made a career out of the fact that he was a 4.2 guy.
Interestingly enough, too, all of those guys – people knock them for drops.
Yeah, and I saw an interesting stat the other day. I don't know if you saw it. Maybe you tweeted it to me. I'm going to say, we can talk about it now in the hot takes, semi-hot take.
Yeah, we'll just inject a hot take right here.
But it was I think it was Marvin Jones and Will Fuller have the same amount of drops. And I think Jones's drop rate is higher. I'm trying to find the exact tweet right now.
I remember it was Vance Meek that was retweeting a tweet.
Yeah, it was,
about that.
It was our buddy 14 Team Mocker, right?
Yeah, they got into a little back and forth about that, and Mocker made a point that maybe drops were being overvalued or overcharged in this case, where do you want the guy who can take the top off the defense and get you those deep touchdowns, or are you going to dwell on those drops, which might happen on 10% of the – I think the statistic for both guys was about 10% of the targets. So are you gonna hem and haw over the 10% of the targets, or are you going to look at the big plays that guys like that make? And Marvin Jones, I think, leading the NFL in receiving yards, and then Will Fuller, of course, having a fantastic rookie year despite a little bit of hot and cold action from him. Only one catch last week in a tough matchup, but they're playing Indianapolis on Sunday night, and I would expect a rebound performance out of Fuller this week.
He'll have 6 catches, 125 yards, and a touchdown, and then one big drop that is going to be the only thing that's talked about.
Yeah, everyone's going to retweet that.
That don't like him.
But I want to talk. I mean, I think if I'm making like an early handicap here on who's going to be, we've mentioned Curtis Samuel, who I think I put him here in with the slot receivers because I think that if you have to pigeonhole him, that's probably where you put him. But he does so much more. He's more like a Theo Riddick type who can play running back, play receiver, but he's better than Theo Riddick. Not to take away from Theo Riddick, but imagine – so I guess Samuel's kind of more like a Reggie Bush type. I think you could put him in that category. He's going to test really well. He's going to run a 4.4, maybe even a sub 4.4. So I put him in there. I put him in this group just because I think pro role. I don't think he's going to. He's not going to be a heavy carry guy out of the backfield, but he can do that. Ryan Switzer is a phenomenal slot receiver, and he just has moves on moves. He's a terrific route runner, and I haven't seen him drop a pass this year. Maybe he has, but I haven't seen it. And he just has a ton of body control. He's an elite punt return man too. And then Ross was the guy. John Ross was the guy who was kind of new to me. He had missed last year with a knee injury. He's the guy with the supposed 4.25 speed. So maybe he is the guy who's going to be popping the top off that defense. And I did see a little bit of body catching with him, which I'm not too critical of guys for that. But maybe that's the parallel. Maybe that's the Will Fuller of this class that we're going to look at. Like you said, 9 touchdowns, and he has like 31 catches. So that's a huge rate.
It is, and that's the thing is like Matt Harmon talked about it when he was on our show in the summer, like the trump card factor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I just think it's overlooked a lot of the times by people who, it's okay to be wrong. It really is. Like, it's okay to miss on and I'm not saying like it's over and done with Will Fuller and everything, but like it's okay to miss on these things and not be correct every once in a while. So, and I think that's what we're seeing right now is that a lot of people are hanging on to what happened or what their pre-draft takes were of Fuller, and they didn't catch the part where he had this amazing trump card that nobody else in the class had.
Right. He had that 4.31 40 time, and in some situations he can't be covered. And is he going to have a game where he gets kind of shut down like last week? And part of that's the quarterback. Brock Osweiler was awful last week. He was actually he seemed like he was on the verge of being benched. He was that bad. And he didn't even hit DeAndre Hopkins until the fourth quarter in that game. And Hopkins, we know, is a guy who has terrific hands and body control. Fuller's made a number of really tough catches too. So I think it's, how heavily do you weigh that? If you're a guy where drops just drive you crazy, some of these guys are going to be too much for you to handle. But if John Ross goes out and runs a 4.25, and let's say he runs a 4.3 or 4.31 like Fuller did, he's going to jump up into that area, into that high pick area. I mean, we saw Corey Coleman listed at a similar size of what Ross is listed at go at 15. He ran a 4.37 at his pro day. So, and Coleman also had some issues with drops. The one game he had right before he broke his hand in practice, he had 6 catches over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. So,
right,
that's a player that we weren't as high on as other people, and maybe we should have been. So, look at these factors, and when I'm excited about the slot receivers, the slot receiver crop that I've seen as far as like Samuel, Switzer, and Ross. All 3 different guys, like totally different type of slot receivers, but very dangerous, all 3 of them.
Anything else on wide receivers before we move on to this weekend's games?
I wanted to just hit on just 3 sleepers that I've identified so far, and these aren't necessarily going to be unfamiliar names, but these are guys that are playing well. I know Jordan Westerkamp of Nebraska. Nebraska's surprisingly top 10 in the country right now in the polls. They're playing really well, and Westerkamp I think he might have missed a game with an injury, but he is a really talented and reliable slot receiver for Nebraska. He's probably going to be available in the day 3 area. So keep an eye on this guy. He's been extremely productive throughout his career. Very reliable, and not to crush Tommy Armstrong, because he's probably going to end up as the most prolific passer in Nebraska history, but he's not the most consistent guy. He's a little bit erratic, and Westerkamp's thrived despite that. And then Taywan Taylor, who's going to be the career record holder at Western Kentucky. This guy has wheels, and he's another guy who's about 6 feet, 190 pounds or so. And if you watch his tape on Draft Breakdown against Rice, you will see 2 of the toughest deep catches that you can see. And he really separates downfield before he has to make those catches. One, a leaping catch, adjusting to a tough throw, and then another one where he lays out, makes a fully extended catch. Very good and productive player. And then this is a guy who is new to me. Last week, I wrote about him at Draft Breakdown and Revenge of the Birds. This is Southern Miss. He's a JUCO transfer from Last Chance U, if you guys have seen the Netflix documentary. The player's name is Alanze Staggers. And Staggers, 2 weeks ago against Rice, he had 6 catches for over 290 yards. He had 3 touchdown catches that were over 75 yards each. 3 over 75 yards each. Last week, he followed that up with another 6 catch, 90-some yards. And I think he had a 28-yard run as well. So, and he was playing banged up. He got banged up early in that game and toughed through it. I'm intrigued by this guy. He looks like he has deep speed. And to me, in that short, I was never a big Southern Miss Mike Thomas guy. This Staggers guy looks like he runs faster, and he's probably raw coming out of the JUCO ranks, and he's a junior, so maybe he won't declare. But he is killing it in yards per catch and clearly emerging as a deep threat and a go-to guy for their fifth-year senior quarterback, Nick Mullins.
Heading to this weekend's matchups, we have some interesting games, and then some games that are against highly ranked teams, but I don't think they're going to be very good. So, first, we have UNC at Miami, Trubisky versus Brad Kaaya. Kaaya, of course, is the darling, and Trubisky is the up-and-coming guy. But there are some interesting receivers in this one as we stay on this topic, I guess, a little bit. We talked about Ryan Switzer. I still am a Stacey Coley fan. Like, he hasn't been good, but I think that's because Kaaya is not very good. But anyways.
Well, this is interesting because Kaaya, Matt Miller came out with his draft board halfway through week 6. Matt Miller, NFL draft scout on Bleacher Report. He came out with his big board, and he had Kaaya ranked ahead of Deshaun Watson. I think he was 14th or 15th overall in the class, and then Watson was the pick, the player after Kaaya. But Coley is another player. I think people think he's going to be a 4-3, 4-4 guy, right?
Yeah.
So this is an interesting. You've got Switzer and Trubisky on one side. You got Kaaya and Coley on the other side. I actually think the North Carolina skill guys in Trubisky and Switzer are the better of the two. But this is a good head-to-head matchup, and of course, Miami is coming off a huge win last weekend. So, in a game played in Florida after that hurricane, by the way, Gators.
The next game is one of the ones I was talking about. Alabama at Tennessee.
Oh, my God. Tennessee again.
Tennessee's ranked number 9, right?
Oh, I'm so tired of Tennessee. We talk about them every week because they're always – give credit, right? They're always playing ranked teams.
Yeah, they're always winning. So.
Well, they lost last week.
Yeah, that's true. But
in a 5-hour game. Good Lord.
Yeah.
Oh.
What wasn't it, double overtime?
It was, but it was approaching the 4.5-hour mark in regulation. It was ridiculous. But Tennessee gets our boy Jalen Hurd back this week.
So no big help taking on the dominant Bama defense.
I think you're going to see some big time front seven play. Right, you've got Jonathan Allen. And you've got Tim Williams. And what's Ryan Anderson on Bama. And then on Tennessee, you got Derek Barnett, who's just tearing it up. There are some people who –
statistically speaking, he's been the best defensive front seven guy in college football.
Right. So, and there are some people that are still not sold on him. And honestly, I haven't broken them down. I've been spending most of my time early in the season looking at offensive players and skill players. So it's going to be a little bit before we get into these defensive guys. But this is always, a fun matchup to see these different, front seven pass rush guys go at it and see who kind of comes out on top. Because we had Barnett versus Myles Garrett last week. Although Myles Garrett was playing through injury. Again, Tennessee gets Hurd back. Although it seemed like they had a couple running backs last week that might be better than Hurd. But Butch Jones says Hurd's their guy, so we'll see. We didn't talk about Nebraska at Indiana.
Because I skipped that one.
Yeah, because again, Nebraska is 10th in the country.
Yeah, I think I blacked that out.
And now Indiana gave Ohio State, as we predicted, as I mentioned, Indiana gave Ohio State a little bit of trouble. Now, Ohio State always pulls ahead in these games late, but Indiana was a thorn in the side. I think Indiana has a decent defense, and I would not be surprised if this is an upset. I'm a little surprised at the high ranking for Nebraska. Now, they do have 3 receivers that can stretch the field. They have a quarterback who, if he's on, he can put up numbers. And they have a running back that I like in Terrell Newby. But beyond that, I was really surprised that they're – oh, and they have a safety that I really like. Nate Jerry is, I think, redshirt senior safety. He can just lay the wood, and he can make some plays in pass coverage too. I think he's going to run pretty well. And he's a big dude, like 6'2", 220. So keep an eye on those guys. Nebraska is actually a kind of fun team to watch, a sneaky fun team. So I would like to see them win this game because I would like to see them be for real.
Yeah, that's just your Ohio State talk.
Well, Ohio State's going to beat Nebraska in a couple weeks, but I would like to see Nebraska be for real going into that game.
Ole Miss at Arkansas, 2 top 25 teams still somehow, some way. I think, Ole Miss is 12, Arkansas is 22. I mean,
SEC, man, like all their teams are in the top 25 for some reason.
I mean, we've talked about Chad Kelly. Is there much else to watch in this game, prospect-wise?
Yeah, Ole Miss has Demario Stringfellow, a receiver that I haven't really broken down, but he's rated pretty highly on the NFL Draft Scout list. Arkansas, we've mentioned Dan Skipper, who I think is exceeding expectations, and then they have a receiver, Keon Hatcher, who I like. But this is a game where I really think Ole Miss is the better team. And I think Chad Kelly's the better quarterback on the field than Austin Allen from Arkansas. That's not a knock on Allen. He's played pretty well too. But Kelly, this is what's frustrating. I mentioned I would come back to Chad Kelly. This is what's frustrating. He's one of the best quarterbacks in college football in terms of third downs, in terms of throwing the ball down the field and making big plays. He's a big play guy. If I could just believe that he could keep his head on straight, then I would consider this guy a legitimate prospect. But as it stands, I just can't.
And maybe the biggest game of the weekend, unless you're an SEC fan, but you get Ohio State at Wisconsin. This is going to be an interesting game because you have a Wisconsin team that always seems to find a way to slow the pace down and kind of take away some of what Ohio State likes to do. But this Ohio State team is just, they just look. As a person that doesn't really care one way or the other, I am really, really hoping and looking forward to an Ohio State-Alabama national title game.
Well, you said that Wisconsin always kind of slows down Ohio State.
Outside of the Big Ten championship.
I was going to say, the last time these two teams faced each other, Ohio State won 59-0 in a Big Ten championship game on their way to a national title. But there's a huge difference, and that difference is at quarterback, where JT Barrett, for whatever reason last week, had the handcuffs on against Indiana, where he had going into the third quarter, he'd only thrown 9 passes. And then it was only after Ohio State made a big 4th down stop, got the ball back, that they kind of let Barrett work on his passing. So does Urban Meyer not trust Barrett? Was it just a game plan thing? I mean, I don't think it's that he doesn't trust Barrett. Barrett's had big games before. But the thing about it is, does Barrett have the arm to threaten deep? Can Wisconsin pack the box and defend the quarterback run and Mike Weber and Curtis Samuel? I don't think they got Samuel involved enough last week against Indiana. He didn't have any catches. He was used primarily as a running back. That was unusual from what we had seen. They didn't give that many carries to Weber. I think Barrett had like 25 carries. So Ohio State seemed content against Indiana to just run JT Barrett, kind of go at a slower pace than what they had been going at, and then rely on their defense. I think they can beat Wisconsin playing that same type of ball, because I don't think Wisconsin has the offense to threaten that Ohio State defense. But the difference is Ohio State's going on the road. They're going to have to generate some offense. They're going to have to get some big plays out of that offense, or the crowd could get into it and really spur Wisconsin on. So I'm always a little bit nervous in these games as an Ohio State alum, where I think Wisconsin can kind of get up for these games, but I don't think Wisconsin has the horses to run with Ohio State. Ohio State's just too fast, too talented. It's a night game. The crowd will be up, but if Ohio State can get out in front early, they'll take the crowd out of the game. And I do think Ohio State's going to cover the spread. They're 10-point favorites. I think they'll win by 2 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns. They beat an Oklahoma team that I thought was a better team than Wisconsin. And I do expect – that Oklahoma team had some firepower on offense. Who's the firepower on Wisconsin's offense?
Right. No, I agree. Like I don't disagree with that.
This is an Ohio State. Ohio State has graduated all these guys, but 2 years ago there was concern that they were going to lose because Melvin Gordon could run wild. They shut him down. This is a better defense, if you can believe it, than that team 2 years ago, and this is a worse Wisconsin skill set as far as running back, receiver. They don't have the horses to beat Ohio State. They will have to absolutely stymie Ohio State on offense and get into like a 16-13 game to really win this game.
Hot takes. I gave you one of mine. I can't find the tweet. I think he deleted it. I text him, so we'll see. But you got any hot takes this week?
Oh, yeah. We've always got hot takes. I'm going to an exchange between Cleveland fans and Pete Smith, who writes for, I want to say Fansided, right? He covers the Browns for the Fansided network, and he is kind of a go-to guy on Twitter for Cleveland Browns questions. And one Twitter account that says Go Browns, Indians, Cavs. So, an unbiased Cleveland Twitter account says, could Kizer win you over, DeShone Kizer win you over in that time frame, even though he's only a redshirt sophomore? Pete says, nope. We'll see, but at this point, it looks like either Kizer or Garrett if the Browns are picking number 1. Pete said it couldn't be much Brownsier to take another redshirt sophomore after Manziel. So this is a hot take to me because it's a hot take to me because of a sheer dismissal of a player because he's a redshirt sophomore. And those of you who've been listening for a while know that I am a student of history, and I do like to study trends and try and figure out where we can eliminate mistakes. But the problem with the redshirt sophomore thing is, yes, it hasn't been very successful to pick redshirt sophomore quarterbacks. But you only have like 9 throughout history of the NFL draft. They're just is not a good sample size for this. Of the thousands and thousands of players that have been taken over the years, and if you point to 9 players and say, these guys didn't make it because they were redshirt sophomores. I don't think that's why they didn't make it. And B, I don't think you can just rule out a group of players just because they're redshirt sophomores. They are still, if they had played the first year or if they had suited up, they'd be juniors. Would they still be? Would you still rule them out? Kaiser's going to be 22 in January. It's not like he's going to be 19 or 20. It's not like he goes to Notre Dame. It's not like he is coming out of, he's coming straight from the JUCO ranks or something like that. This take is just steaming hot, especially when you bring in Manziel to the equation. Have you ever heard of DeShone Kizer partying, popping champagne bottles, being followed around Notre Dame like a celebrity? This guy is a player who was, I think, unduly criticized by his coach a few weeks ago and took responsibility. He stood up for it. He's been a team guy. He's a quiet guy. Is he the most mature player? I don't know. I don't know. I haven't talked to him. But he's a big guy with a big arm. He's got a good skill set. And we have seen this year in the NFL, coaching staffs have to be successful with these young quarterbacks. And guys like Dak Prescott are putting up numbers. Carson Wentz, and even Cody Kessler is having some degree of success. So if Hugh Jackson can milk some decent quarterback play out of Cody Kessler, and props to Cody Kessler, I don't want to take away from this guy. It looks like he is a player who does what Hugh Jackson wants. He gets rid of the ball quickly and moves the chains and doesn't seem intimidated by the pro game. That's good. If the Browns decide that Kizer can get rid of the ball quickly and not be intimidated, why wouldn't they pick him? I just don't understand. Are their analytics team going to say that 9 guys out of like thousands of draft picks? No, please.
And then, looking through all of, Twitter and just the different stuff, I always like to come back to our buddies, and Ian Wharton's breaking down Brad Kaaya tonight, and I thought the hot take you gave earlier about Matt Miller's kind of, I don't know, was it his ranking or was it just his mock draft?
It was his initial big board where he ranked position by position in a top 50. Okay, and I talked to Matt about it because he didn't have Curtis Samuel on it, and he just, for some of the underclassmen, he was just kind of waiting to get a feel.
But Ian is kind of going through Brad Kaaya right now, and he is kind of saying what we have talked about quite a bit, and it's why Matt's take is interesting. And I always wonder, and this can kind of be our conversation in the show, I always wondered, do you think, like, Matt and guys can be unintentionally influenced by people they speak with in the NFL regarding scouting, et cetera, and how they tend to grade players? And I'm not saying he does it on purpose. I like Matt, and we chat, and he's a good guy. But do you think these guys that have access to conversation can put too much thought and weight into what they hear from these things?
Well, I can only speak from my own personal experience in this regard, and on a few occasions over the years, I've been privy to some information similar to that. I wasn't able to publish it the way a guy like Matt is, where he's a report. He does some reporting for Bleacher Report. He's able to publish some of that stuff. But I got some inside intel on a couple players, and I do think it influenced me. I mean, to be honest, I do think it did influence me. I don't have any type of inside intel anymore. I don't have any type of sources. I like it that way because I feel like I can be more true to myself, and I feel like I've gotten better for not having that. That's just me. I think there are probably a lot of people out there who can give an honest and true take without being influenced subconsciously, like I have been. You know, I consider that one of my mistakes. But I have seen clear evidence of analysts and writers being influenced on their takes on certain players by agents, on Twitter, by fans, and by people who get some inside scoop, who are legitimately in the know about certain things. I'm not sure that that's what's happened here. I know that Matt did report that some scouts from 3 teams thought Kaya was a better prospect than Watson. Matt had those guys lined up next to each other. I'm not sure that intel from 3 teams would influence him one way or the other. And I read that as that those guys are at a dead heat. I've tried to rank players like that before, where you have 2 guys like that. It's like I could give or take. You know, one of these guys or the other. It doesn't really matter. I don't think that it's in this case, he's got 2 guys that he thinks are good, and he just put them next to each other. But, you know, I just don't agree with him in this case. I think Watson's a better player than Kaya, and I think Watson's kind of a victim of circumstance in this case, where he had such a great sophomore year that the expectations were sky high. But what are Kaya's expectations? And he just, to me, he's a little robotic, a little mechanical, as he doesn't quite have the same skill set. But I could see why people like Kaya. I mean, I don't think he stinks. I think he's more of a day 2 guy than the early round pick, or than the first round pick. But yeah, absolutely, Seth. I think that people get influenced by these things all the time, whether it's intentional or not. But I don't necessarily think it's. I see the flip side too, where there are some people who cannot be penetrated with any type of logic and who just stubbornly dig into bad takes repeatedly. So I see that too.
Yeah, I read that article too every week on Thursday. Wait, I mean. I'm kidding. They're all my friends. Well, the people that do the cornerbacks are my friends. So, but yeah, and it wasn't like a shot at Matt, because like I said, I like Matt's work. I like what he does. I was just curious, and I think the conversation is important to have, because I think just human nature is to, like, when you get information that's closer than the information that you get, it tends to force you to go back and kind of re-examine what you've seen, and then you go, okay, what did I miss, and kind of like restack things. And I think re-examination is important. Otherwise, you end up with things like Carson Wentz is terrible, and then you just look like a never mind. So yeah, but I think both are important, and it's important to see that. And
how did Wentz do on at the end of the game?
I know he throws one interception, and all of a sudden he's
Seth, his air yards are so low.
That's fine.
And it's funny though, because remember a couple of weeks, like week 2, when people were like, "Oh, Zeke Elliott's only averaged 3.6 yards a carry," and what has he done since then in the 3 games? You know,
I know. I'm in a money fantasy league at my work, and even though I draft with a bunch of doctors, I was still able to pick Zeke Elliott at 10. So I appreciate all the help there.
They were probably following a lot of fantasy people on Twitter that were talking about zero running back, and Which, by the way, I do not think is bad strategy. I think it's actually good strategy, but it does open the door for people to get a guy like Zeke Elliott or David Johnson late in their first round of their fantasy draft, and those guys are just killing it. Luckily, I mean, in their case, they're two of the like 7 backs in the league that haven't been injured. So that's kind of a nice bonus. I got one more take, though. Go ahead. This is from our buddy, a mainstay of this show, at Gam Scout. He said, Jamal Williams is my dark horse running back that could enter the first round. What can't he do? So Jamal Williams, he's the running back out of BYU.
I've never heard of this player, by the way.
Oh, okay. He's a fifth-year senior. So
he's 30.
Get it together. No, actually, interestingly enough, he is 21. He plays freshman year at 17 years old. Whoa. And he turned 21, I think, this past spring. So he'll be 22 going into the draft. And Jamal Williams, he also missed most of 2014 with an injury, and then missed 2015 with an off-the-field issue having to do with school conduct code, I think. So BYU, we know they have a tricky conduct code. It could have been a number of things. It's not really clear. But Jamal Williams is an interesting guy. I actually watched him this week, and I thought he kind of compared to Devontae Booker from a talent standpoint. And being that he's younger, that automatically kind of ups him a little bit from where I had Booker. And he might be a little bit faster. I'm not really sure yet. Because he doesn't look like a burner. He's a bigger guy. He's about 6 foot, 220 pounds. But the reason I want to talk about this, it wasn't to dog Mr. Gamble. It wasn't this was an incredibly hot take. But what's interesting about this to me is that Jamal Williams has been everywhere on Twitter this week because they posted a video of him on Draft Breakdown. Last week it was Mitch Trubisky. There was a video of him on Draft Breakdown. You can always tell who the guy with the new video on Draft Breakdown is because that is the guy who like 40 people are going to talk about and tweet vines about that week. So this week it was Jamal Williams week from BYU. I urge you all to go to Draft Breakdown and watch that video. He actually set a BYU record for rushing yards in a game a couple weeks ago against Toledo. Scored 5 touchdowns in that game. So it's a good piece of tape to watch for him. Trubisky was the guy a couple weeks ago. It's just funny to me. We can always tell who has the new video because it just becomes the hot topic. And today was John Ross, who we mentioned earlier, because I think the NFL.com, I think it was Lance Zierlein, tweeted something from Scouts that said, John Ross, this is a guy, keep an eye on this guy. He's a burner. And honestly, that's when I looked at John Ross. I was like, burner? Sign me up. Let me take a look at this guy. And yeah, he looks legit. I'd like to see more.
I don't watch much BYU. I'm not going to lie. I do watch a bit of Washington because they're interesting. So
yeah, Washington, man, they have some really interesting prospects at Washington this year. They're the Pac-12's only hope for that playoff berth. Because Stanford has
my Stanford Cardinals got destroyed.
Wazoo. Shout out to my buddy Matt Stanford, who works for Campus Insiders. They do some nice video work over there, but he's a Wazoo. He's a Coug, so shout out to Matt tonight. But, yeah, Stanford getting crushed, USC, UCLA.
Hey, don't sleep. ASU's coming. ASU, OSU, Rose Bowl. We'll go and watch one of my alma maters get destroyed like a 60 to –
No, OSU is going to be in the national championship game, my friend.
You know what we're going to end up having, right? We're going to end up having Michigan, Alabama in the 1-4 game, and then we're going to have OSU and Clemson in that 2-3 game.
I don't think Clemson's going to make it, man.
You don't think so?
No.
Who are they going to lose to, though?
Well, I don't know. Maybe they will. They do have a real Florida State feel. But Florida State had won the title the year before.
Yeah, where they get blown out by a team that'll be just fodder for the national championship, Michigan Wolverines.
Yeah, not to mention, but get three Big Ten teams in there: Nebraska, Ohio State, Michigan, and Alabama. Seems like a good playoff to me.
The Big 12's not going to have anybody this year. Well, I mean, West Virginia is undefeated. So I guess if they run,
they're ranked 20th at this point. So yeah,
if they run the table, I guess, right?
Yeah, I hadn't really given it that much thought until we just started talking about it. But it's for people out there on the West Coast. Hope for the Washington Huskies to run the table, get into that playoff. You can get Washington, you can get Alabama, and you can get there might be two. I can definitely see a scenario where there's two teams from one of these conferences, SEC or Big Ten. I mean, Florida kind of, they didn't have to play last week, so maybe they'll get in. Tennessee, maybe they beat Bama, and then maybe I'm not looking at the divisions right now, but you've got there's a jumble right now. And it doesn't look like you said, it doesn't look like a Big 12 team's going to get in. Houston lost to Navy. They blew it. That was their one shot.
Go Navy.
They could have done it. So interesting shape up here. And I think when did the playoff rankings come out? After week 8?
I think so, something like that.
We're not big college. We're not big college football rankings guys. We're draft guys.
Yeah, that's right. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Like, honestly, I legit do think we're gonna get Michigan, Ohio State, Bama are the 3 teams I think get in. The 4th team's gonna be interesting because I think
that's really interesting because if that Ohio State Michigan game is like everything to the fans, and if it ends up meaning they both get into the playoffs, And honestly, only one of those 2 teams can get into the Big Ten championship game. Don't forget about that.
Right, and that's what I think is going to help them get both teams in. It's going to be like
team that doesn't get into the Big Ten championship makes the playoff. That would be, oh my God!
Didn't that happen?
The takes would be amazing.
Year? I don't remember. I can't remember that far back.
The takes would be so amazing.
So, all right, guys, thanks for listening, especially at the end where we're talking college football playoffs and we have no idea what we're talking about.
I'm sure our listeners have much better grasp on all that stuff. So,
but we'll be back next week. I think Justin's going on vacation to San Diego, so if he's held up for any reason or needs a day off when he gets back, we'll figure it out.
We'll be back as long as I'm not hungover.
But thanks for listening as always, and make sure you check us out on iTunes and SoundCloud. Like us, subscribe. We appreciate it. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.